So, are you DTFF?
Again, here's Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your host, Jake Trowbridge and Dustin Lunt.
We've got a fuzzy-voiced Dustin or fuzzy-faced Dustin in here.
Ooh.
Sir, how are you?
I don't know what's going on. That was weird.
You got that
I am
semi-gloss
doing
face.
fine, I guess. I don't know. All of a sudden we click live and all things go to hell, I guess, computer-wise. I don't know.
You got a real weird vibe right now, man. You got a real semi-gloss look to the camera. It's just one of those things. It's one of those things. But I'm sure within a minute or two it will dissolve into the loveliness that you normally have. That's what I think.
Well, I've always been told I have a face for radio, so that aligns just perfectly.
Who would dare say such a thing? How are you?
I know.
Tonight.
Well, aside from these technical glitches, excuse me,
You're
not doing
apart.
too bad. I know. It's I'm doing well this evening. I'm excited to talk about this division here, the AFC East. It's going to be terrific as we're closing in on the last couple divisions here. I'm really excited to talk about it because it's a kind of a division of the haves and have-nots, a little bit of what we did last week, but we'll kind of save some of that. So how are you doing, Jake?
Beautiful, just wonderful. Now that you're coming in crystal clear through my connection, I'm excited about this division. It's I mean, it's going to get real interesting when we start talking about the depths of these teams, but I'm excited. This is the second to last, the penultimate, as they call it, of our divisional breakdown series.
Ooh.
So we'll wrap that
using
up
that journalism degree, Jake. Well done.
I know. I'm really pulling that out of the barracks. But then we get to move on to, not that I don't love these. I love these, obviously. But then it's like we're right around sleepers, breakouts, drinking buddies territory. That always gets really interesting. So I don't know. I'm looking forward. The season is almost upon us, really.
Yes. Training camps are going to be opening soon, and it's just going to get real exciting really quick here, and I'm here for it. But before we get into all that good stuff, we've got a fun beer tonight, Jake, that I purchased, set on your porch. This one takes me back. I had to buy it because it takes me back to my formative years, the early teens, kind of late junior high. If anybody knows Ghostbusters, and especially the animated show from like the late 80s, early 90s, terrific show. You should go check it out for one. They did a great job. But from this came the Ecto Cooler High C Ecto Cooler drink.
That's right.
Someone has made it into a beer. That someone being Eagle Park Brewing out of Muskego, Wisconsin. And yes, Jake is holding it up. It is spot on color of what Ecto Cooler is. It is, and it makes me so happy. I tasted it. It reminds me of Ecto Cooler. I'm loving every second of it. And down at the end of the street, we have a liquor store, and the guy that was working is like, "Oh, that just came in today." So I'm feeling very, very happy that I was able to get it before it sold out, because I'm sure this is one of those beers that will sell out immediately just from the nostalgia aspect of it.
Yeah, you know what I love about this? Not only is it bright Ecto Green, not as only bright. What the fuck is the name of that one that they ghost bust?
Slimer.
It is green. Slimer. It is Slimer green. But also, I don't even think it says what this is on the container outside of just calling it Ecto Cooler. That's it. That's all it says.
No, that's it.
It has respect.
It has nothing about flavors, what's in it, nothing. It's just Ecto Cooler.
No, it's the Ecto Cooler, and it's the typical like warning label that they have to put on alcoholic beverages. I don't even know if this is technically a beer. We don't even really know if this is a beer. This could be something beer adjacent for all we know. But I don't hate it.
This is a malt beverage.
Oh, there you go.
It's not technically a beer, but it is a malt beverage. I'm here for it. It is terrific. It tastes good. It's not too like tart. It's just it gives me all the good feels. I love every second of this.
How's it compared to the high C that you recall from your youth?
I feel like it's spot on. I mean, it's probably been about 30 years since I've had a high C ecto cooler, but from the memory banks up here, it's like spot on. Only this will, if I drink enough of them, get me drunk. So that's an added bonus.
This is great, by the way, for Packer game day. I think we should do like this and then a regular beer and then this and then a regular beer, because you get the green and gold that way. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm glad that you brought this back into my life as well. I don't even want to call this Jets green because that would be a disservice to this beverage, this fine beverage.
Yes,
trying to figure a nice transition into our topic. I couldn't do it. I failed. Sorry.
Before we get into the main thing, because I had a Mr. Scampers in the chat joining us. How you doing this evening, Scampers? But yeah, let's get right into this. No drunk trades, of course. As we're finishing up the divisional series here, we're saving them all. We got too much to talk about here, even to spend a few minutes chatting about drunk trades. But we've got them all locked in, ready to go for once we return. So don't worry, folks. If you've been wondering where it's at, it will be returning. So let's get into this. And Jake, should I go right down the show sheet, or is there a team you'd rather start with first?
I am not comfortable going right down the show sheet because I don't like where the show sheet ends. But if we could, I would like to actually go reverse order, maybe, if we could do that.
Okay. We can do whatever we want. It's our show.
Good. All right, great.
You realize this, right? Yeah? Okay, good. All right, so we will start reverse order, and the Jets happen to be the last team on this list. But first, that we're going to talk about this evening. So over the offseason, they lost Zach Wilson, Brett Rippon, Trevor Siemian, all the great quarterbacks, Randall Cobb, Corey Davis, and CJ Uzoma. And they brought on board Tyrod Taylor and Mike Williams. And through the draft, third-round wide receiver Malachi Corley, fourth-round running back Braylon Allen on Wisconsin. In the fifth round, quarterback Jordan Travis, and also in the fifth round, running back Isaiah Davis. So, Jake, I'm going to pass this to you. What are your overall feelings about this team and kind of the moves they've made this offseason, fantasy-wise, at least?
I don't know necessarily that this is a team that should be judged as much for their offseason as they should just for their general set of circumstances. So last season, obviously, probably would have looked much different had their starting quarterback played more than 4 snaps before getting injured with a drastically bad Achilles injury. That's my medical diagnosis of that. It was a drastically bad Achilles injury. He is
drastically
old
bad.
And
nice.
Yes. And so all concerns and even hopes about this team hinge on the quarterback situation. And so it's just a simple matter of, does Aaron Rodgers play? How well does Aaron Rodgers play? Because that's going to dictate every fantasy asset on this team, probably save for one, I would say, in my humble opinion. And so I don't even want to really belabor this anymore. But I think we have to ask ourselves, Dustin, how much do we trust Aaron Rodgers, a 40-year-old quarterback coming off of an Achilles injury that frankly at times doesn't seem like he wants to even play football anymore. So like, does he play? How does he look when he plays? What are your expectations for him?
Yeah, he's going to play this year. I mean, us as Packer fans here, we know Aaron Rodgers very intimately, as much as a fan can know Aaron Rodgers, let's be honest. He's going to play. Like he has the ego where he is not going to say, I'm going to end my career on an Achilles injury 4 snaps into a season. Like that's just not him. He has too much ego to let that go. So he is definitely going to be playing this year. I have no doubts about it. What can we expect from him and how much can we trust him? That's the bigger question. I think for real football, he's going to be just fine. He's got a great wide receiver in Garrett Wilson. He's got a great running back in Breece Hall. He's got questions after that, but I think he can do enough to make them fantasy relevant. But as far as drafting him, I'm not interested in drafting him. I think he's well outside the top 12 this season. If I had to take him as a second quarterback or pick him up off the waiver wire, that I would do in a pinch, maybe kind of game script dependent, but I don't trust him too far. I think he'll be fine. Like I said, real football purposes, he'll do what he needs to get done, and he'll help the Jets win some games. But for fantasy, I'm just not interested this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try my best just to leave all the clutter to the outside here, but I have my skepticism about whether he would want to go out after that injury or not, because you did say he's got that ego. What if he's a little bit zapped after the injury and he feels it? He can at least use that as an excuse, as an out of like, oh, it was the injury. It wasn't me. But you brought up a great point about his fantasy value, because even in his back-to-back MVP seasons, when for real life football, he was very good, it's not like you could rely on him consistently for fantasy. He had 1 year where he was like a top guy out of that, but even the following MVP season, it wasn't as if he was this set it and forget it quarterback. I would say he falls out of the top 12 as well. I'm not interested in drafting him. Even in 2 QB leagues, I just go, give me somebody with better upside, I think, than him at this stage. Because I'm scared. He's a 40-year-old guy who uses his legs to extend plays, and one of those legs just got brutally injured with an Achilles thing. So I don't want it. I don't want it. But
I think to your point, he has a safe floor. I think you'll know what to expect week in and week out. He'll give you a pretty safe floor, but I don't think there is no ceiling there. I don't see him, passing for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like, that's just not Aaron Rodgers anymore. Like, those games are well behind him at this point.
Yeah, I would say so. But then the question becomes, is he good enough? So is he still a good enough real life quarterback where we don't have to worry about the pieces around him when we're drafting them? And I would say for one of them, I'm a big time Breece Hall guy. Always have been, probably always will be. Last season, with the dumpster fire of quarterback situation that he had, was still amazing for fantasy. Still had almost 1,600 scrimmage yards, even though, defenses were like, that's the guy we got to stop because nobody else is going to do anything. And he still did that. So is Breece for you this year? I mean, no matter what, is he worth a top 5 pick? Because that's where he's going right now. He's overall pick 4, I think, in RB2. Does that gel for you?
Absolutely. I think he is one of the safest options as far as running backs go this year. There's not many of them that you can consider a real safe, strong option, but he is definitely one of them that I would be targeting, especially if I am in that like 4-5 range. I think that'd be perfect to be able to pick him up. If anything, having Aaron Rodgers back is only going to help him because defenses will actually they won't be able to stack the boxes like they were last year. So if anything, it's going to open up some running lanes for him a little bit. Rodgers does like to utilize the running back out of the backfield. We saw that with Aaron Jones and the myriad of other running backs that he played with over the years in Green Bay. Why that would change at this point, I don't see a reason why, especially as a good dump off. Breece Hall's absolutely smash top 5 pick.
And so Braylon Allen and who's the other gentleman they added? Isaiah Davis, those 2 running backs that they added in the draft. We're assuming that those guys are just spell backs. Like Breece Hall not going to get 90% of the backfield because no running back does these days. So, right, it's just a better depth behind him. That's the situation with that.
Yeah, I mean the Braylon Allen draft was a little odd for me considering the draft capital that they used on him. But I do agree. I think
Round
for
4
Dynasty,
pick.
picking up Braylon Allen, I think is fine for Dynasty. But for redraft, he's fine. I mean, I'm not going to be picking him up unless there's an injury to Breece Hall. That'd be the only way that he gets any significant work. Otherwise, it's Breece's backfield 100%.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Braylon Allen's ceiling is AJ Dillon from the last couple of years, and that's not good for fantasy. Braylon Allen, though, in Dynasty,
if that even.
Yeah, Braylon Allen, still only 12 years old for all of you Dynasty enthusiasts. I don't know if you knew that. Very, very young running back in there. But so the one guy who I do think is more dependent on Aaron Rodgers for his fantasy value is Garrett Wilson. And Garrett Wilson is like a hot commodity right now. He is, I think I made a note of this. He is wide receiver 8 in current ADP, 14th overall. That means early round 2, you have to draft Garrett Wilson. Are you so confident in Aaron Rodgers playing all year and looking good enough that you draft him that high?
I don't know. Do you happen to have pulled up who is going right around him or right after him in drafts?
I will pull it up right now.
Because I'm just interested.
So we can take a quick
because
look.
It seems a little high. I'm not going to lie. It seems a little high for me.
Here's who he's going around. Let's do the after. Let's do the guys after. Okay. So would you rather have Garrett Wilson or Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Ooh, that's close. I'd probably go with Garrett Wilson only because Marvin Harrison's a rookie and I just, all right.
Him and Kyler,
I mean, it's like razor thin. That's a okay. Next.
And then next guy, I think this is actually a very interesting one. Drake London or Garrett Wilson?
I have high hopes for Drake this year. I'm going to say Drake London.
Yeah. Kirk Cousins, I mean, similar injury that he's having to deal with. There's more weapons, presumably, because they have Kyle Pitts. I guess unless you think Mike Williams is a threat to Garrett Wilson over on the other side, which I don't, because he'll play 5 games, because that's what he does. I think I think I'd still go with Drake London as well.
I guess with those two guys, I guess he's fairly valued right now. It just seemed like when he said he's, early second round, it's like, but I guess that's fair considering those two guys right after him. I know we could keep going down the list, but
sure.
But I think that's pretty fair value. It just felt a little high for me.
Yeah, I think what that says to me, at least, because it does feel high, is I probably won't like having an early pick in the second round. Like if I get that spot in a fantasy draft, I'm probably not going to love it. And I probably will start to look at running backs more than I typically would in the second round because of that.
Right.
So yeah, not great.
Well, and that just speaks to a lot of what I've been hearing so far this offseason of how the second round is just kind of a crapshoot. And there's a lot of question marks in the second round of drafts altogether. So I think that just speaks to that whole theory and kind of chatter going around in the fantasy industry.
Yeah, it's a dookie farm. It's an outright dookie farm in the early parts of the second round right now, and I don't like it. Anything else that you want to say about the Jets, or can we mercifully move on from them at this stage?
I think a sneaky late round tight end pick, Tyler Conklin, I think could be. I think I've been picking him up.
You're one of those.
A lot of best ball drafts. I do. I think. I just think there could be opportunity only because after Garrett Wilson, like you said, Mike Williams plays 5 games if he's lucky. They're going to have to throw the ball to someone else. Why not a big body tight end? That's all I'm going to say about that.
You know who that big body guy is actually going to be is just Allen Lazard. So Allen Lazard is still with the team and basically didn't do anything last year because Aaron wasn't there. But now that Aaron's presumably there, I think that he falls into that slot. Can we do,
Fair
oh my
enough.
God, can we do the grossest beer bet ever and just do straight up points per game, Alan Lazard versus Tyler Conklin? Can we do that?
Sure, let's do it.
Fuck it. All right. We are fucking degenerates. All right. I will put that in and then we can move on to any other team.
All right. So let's move on. Let's get the grossest of the gross out of the way here, and we'll talk Patriots. Sorry, Patriots fans, but you've had this coming for years. So notable losses: Mac Jones, Zeke Elliott, Devontae Parker, still in the league, Pharaoh Brown, and Mike Gesicki. They brought on board Antonio Gibson, Jacoby Brissett, KJ Osborne, and Mitchell Wilcox. And via the draft, first round quarterback Drake May, second round wide receiver Jalen Polk, fourth round wide receiver Javon Baker, and in the seventh, wide receiver Jaheim Bell. Obviously, they got their quarterback of the future, shipped off the old, in with the new. They got their quarterback. They made some moves to try to bolster that wide receiver room around him, try to get him a little bit more talent than what he had there previously. So the Patriots do understand that, they needed help with that offense. I'm still not convinced that things are going to turn around this year, even with him there. What are your thoughts, Jake?
I didn't like the draft. I didn't like their mode of operandi. That's not how you say that. I didn't like what they did in the offseason with the draft. I wish I was willing them to not take their quarterback of the future right now because they're not set up to sustain success for whoever it was going to be. So I just feel bad for Drake May. I feel it's a little bit like the Bryce Young situation last year in Carolina. And I can't think of many pieces on this team that I will be excited to draft come draft day and redraft. And there's only a couple that I even really want in Dynasty at this point, that I'm willing to take the dart throw on. So it's a really unappetizing plate that we've been served from New England this year. And is there we've got, again, the specifics that we'll go through here, but just generally, does a single name from this team stand out to you as I got to have them?
Gotta have? No. Depending on when redraft season comes around, I might have some interest in Rhamondre. But again, it depends on where his ADP actually falls come draft season, because there's not really a lot behind him. So I think he's going to be given the opportunity. But I have a feeling he's going to get pushed up draft boards because of that reason. So if he's a early fourth round pick, I'm probably out on him. But if he drops to the fifth or sixth, a little bit more interested at that point.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the facets that I did want to focus on, because I think this backfield is probably the thing that's going to have the most worthwhile attention put onto it. So Rhamondre Stevenson versus Antonio Gibson. That's who's behind Rhamondre. Look, you know how I am about my dude, Antonio Gibson. He's my new Robbie Anderson. I'm always out, and then I get pulled back in every year on Antonio Gibson. So if we look at their current ADPs, and again, we got a month at least before people start drafting in earnest, I understand. But Rhamondre Stevenson is RB20 right now. Gibson is RB46. So that's massive. I don't know. Maybe that puts Rhamondre close to round 4 or 5. I honestly don't know. I didn't look at the total. But that much of a discrepancy, is the cost worth it to you for Rhamondre if you had to pick one of these guys? Or would Gibson be better based on value at that point?
I think Gibson could be interesting just where you're drafting him. I feel like he's a good late round guy to take a dart on because he has the receiving upside. He is a converted wide receiver. He just never got utilized that way when he was in Washington for whatever reason. We don't know why. So I think just based on value, I would take him because, like I said, I feel like Rhamondre is going to get pushed up draft boards, and it's not going to be great.
Yeah, here's my thought on these two. I'm out on Rhamondre entirely. Like, I don't want Rhamondre whatsoever. Even if he stays around his spot, I think he's a dead zone candidate. We should say he got an extension by New England. He did get a 2-year contract, I think, just went down late last week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still really nervous because I think Rhamondre is going to be the first and second down back, like the pure runner of the two, because he's better at that. Yep. And how often are the Patriots going to be in scoring position where, like, if he gets the red zone work, is that even going to become anything? I don't think it does. I think he's capped at like 5 touchdowns this year. Meanwhile, Gibson's probably going to get a lot of dump offs because, as we've been talking about, nobody exciting is on this team. There's not a lot of great pass catchers. There's a lot of reasonable dudes there. But I think Gibson, as the third down back, actually has a shot at, 80 targets this year just out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying it's going to look good or pretty.
Yeah. So according to Fantasy Pros, Rhamondre is currently going 63rd overall. So what was that, early 6th round?
I think 5th, right? 12, 24, 36, 48, 60. That's 5. Early round 5.
No. 63.
Yeah.
So 5 is 60. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 5. I know math. I'm on vacation. Leave me alone.
Okay.
So just based on that, I'm going to be out. But when you're looking at guys that are going after him,
Mm-hmm.
I would much rather take a flyer on some of these other guys. So you've got guys that I'm personally interested in. You got DeAndre Swift, James Conner, Zach Moss. I mean, those 3 guys for sure I would be interested in. And they're going 2 rounds later than him.
Oh, God, yeah.
I would rather take that than take the chance on Rhamondre early 5th round. Like, that's just too rich for me. And I think he's going to get pushed up even further the closer we get to redraft season here, just because running backs tend to have more of a premium on them for your standard just PPR home league than wide receivers do.
I agree. I absolutely agree. We actually have come to a consensus on that. Good for us. I'm just going to answer this question very quickly. Are there any Patriots wide receivers worth drafting? For me, no. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to touch any of them.
No, I might put a interested little star on the waiver wire on a couple guys. Demario Douglas being one of them, but maybe one of the rookies as well. But more as like, hey, if they start to pop, maybe kind of an end of the bench. If I have a guy that's not producing that I could swap out just as maybe there's a flex play that I need him for bye-week fill-ins type deal. But no one I'm drafting, though. Absolutely not.
All right, great. Let's move on from that. Drake May, just last thing I have to ask about this team. Not for this year. We're not taking him this year in redraft. I know neither of us are going to do that. But in Dynasty, long-term, are you fucking with Drake at all in your Dynasty leagues? Have you drafted him anywhere or traded for him anywhere?
I haven't drafted him at all. To be fair, I only had a couple rookie drafts. If he fell, I would draft him if he fell far enough, but I wouldn't be taking an early draft pick on him, even in Superflex. Like, that just doesn't interest me because I just don't like the situation. But if he fell, I would take the chance on him. If anything, quarterback values don't decrease even when they have a bad season. I mean, we saw how high Zach Wilson's value was, for like 3 years. He was still relatively high. I said relatively, don't give me that look, as far as value goes. So they don't lose value like other positions. So I'd be willing to do that and then trade them because quarterbacks are always at a premium in dynasty leagues.
Counterpoint to your quarterbacks don't lose value. Mac Jones. Remember how quickly Mac Jones stock plummeted, though, after like a year and a half? We're just like, all right, ugh, woof. I mean, it's Mac Jones. I understand it's not necessarily apples to oranges, but it's not apples to orangutans either. It's I think a reasonable comp. I'd rather have JJ McCarthy than Drake May. I'm just going to say that in Dynasty, I'd rather have JJ McCarthy.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So I'll just leave it at that. We can please move on to anything. The next two teams are actually very good to talk about for fantasy, and I want to get to them.
Yeah, as we said, we're going to go up the sheet. As much as I want to skip the Dolphins and save them for last, because let's be honest, there's the most meat on the bone. We're not going to do that. So we'll go to the Dolphins. In the offseason, they lost Robbie Chosen, Chase Claypool, Cedric Wilson, and Tyler Kroft. They brought on board Jonnu Smith, OBJ, and in the draft, 4th round running back Jalen Wright, 6th round wide receiver Malik Washington, and 7th round wide receiver Taj Washington. So a couple Washingtons joining the team. This team is by far the cream of the crop as far as fantasy goodness in the AFC East. Whoa, just tons and tons of fantasy options here. Too many, one might say. What is going to be your process come draft season as far as filtering through which of these options you want to target? Like, is there any sneaky fantasy value here, or do you feel like ADP wise, the fantasy assets are where they should be?
I think it's really interesting to think about where all of these guys finished last season. Those of them who were with the team, obviously, where they finished last season and where they're being drafted, this season. So I went through the ADPs. I'm going to leave out Tua for right now. He's worthy of his own separate discussion. But the skill position guys, Tyreek is going as wide receiver 2, Waddle going as wide receiver 19. Waddle, of course, dealt with a lot of injuries last year, kind of unfortunately becoming his MO right now, which sucks. Then we've got Devin Achane is drafted as RB9 right now. Mostert going as RB31, which was kind of surprising to me. Jalen Wright going as RB45, and then Jonnu Smith going as tight end 24, kind of out there on his own little island. So when you go through the list, of course, Tyreek Hill, you're like wide receiver 2. Yeah, he should be wide receiver 2. Some people probably have him as wide receiver 1, and I get that. I don't blame him with that. Yeah. And then you go like Waddle, wide receiver 19, totally tracks. Yeah, he's one of those guys. We always talk about teams that have a duo at wide receiver who are likely to finish in the top 24. Those two, as good a bet as any. Achane at RB9, that's the one that I think is spicy. But when you look at what he did on a points per game basis last year, you should know better than most as your drinking buddy last year how fucking awesome he was. And then the one that's like, wait, what are we doing? Is Raheem Mostert at RB31. I'm not even a Raheem Mostert guy. And that seems really, really low. RB31 for the guy who was a top 5 running back last season. So I think that's where we have to draw the line. It's like focus on the backfield first. And are you, even as, again, the Devin Achane guy from last season, are you looking at that gap and going, I'll take him again this year? Or are you going to wait and draft Mostert if he's that further back?
No, I'll take Achane where he's at. Is he a little boomer bust? Yes. But the weeks that he booms, he's going to single-handedly win you your week. Like he is that good. And we saw it on very limited touches. You have to remember he was injured. He missed some games last year. So if he stays healthy, and I think they're going to want to get him a little bit more involved than they are, or than they did last year. It's so exciting what the possibilities could be. And speaking to Mostert, it doesn't surprise me that he's that low. I think age is a big factor. And 2, Jalen Wright is the guy that's going to be eating into his usage, not Achane. So I think that's why you're seeing him so low. If he's falling super late in drafts, would I still take a flyer on him as like my 3rd, 4th running back? Absolutely. Because he is still going to bust off big plays. Like we didn't see any drop off last year, but I think where he's being drafted right now is just that concern about his age and the rookie coming in. But there's nothing to say, like, we didn't see anything on film. There's nothing according to the metrics that said, hey, this guy is starting to fall off. Like this hasn't happened. I think that's just a greater collective concern about him. So if he's falling and I didn't get Achane early for whatever reason, yeah, I would definitely take a chance on Mostert this year for redraft too.
Yeah, because I think the deal with, I mean, again, Achane, yeah, I don't think that he's ever going to be a 20 touch per game guy, nor do the Dolphins want him to be that, but
No.
he doesn't have to be. He doesn't have to be near that to be incredibly valuable for fantasy. Give him 10 to 12 touches a game, and he'll still be fucking phenomenal. My thing with Raheem Mostert is like, yes, I get the injuries potential or the age issues that are popping up. I still think he's going to be the guy to start the season. By the end of the season, I think Jalen Wright will overtake Raheem Mostert. But it's right that Jalen Wright is being drafted that far back because I don't think you're going to get much use out of him early on in the season. So take Mostert for, I don't know, as long as you can have him on your team, racking up RB2 finishes before Wright eventually takes over. And once he does, then great. Thanks for everything you've done so far, Raheem, and wish him farewell. But I think at that draft price,
and hopefully, and hopefully at that point you can see kind of the writing on the wall. If you're a Jalen Wright, you roster him, not Jalen Wright, Mostert. If you roster him on your team and say, you see the writing on the wall where his usage is starting to decline, Jalen Wright's starting to increase, go pick him up on the waiver wire, swap him out, and you'll be still running along just fine.
Yep. All right. So we've sorted out the backfield, which is my big question. But so the wide receivers, like, am I going to draft Tyreek Hill? Of course, I'm going to draft Tyreek Hill. Will I take Jalen Waddle at cost?
Yeah, zero questions.
Waddle at cost. I don't think we should just expect to copy and paste from last year, though. Do you, in terms of like production?
Tyreek, yes. I expect the same thing out of Tyreek. Kind of what I was saying about Mostert. Like, we haven't seen anything with this drop off. And I know he's getting up there in age as far as wide receivers go a little bit. But no, zero concerns about Tyreek. Waddle, I think, could be a little bit of a sneaky value. If he hangs around that wide receiver 19 value, I will be targeting him in so many drafts. Like, he would be my guy I would be going after because I think he could return so much better value than wide receiver 19 come the end of the season. I truly do. So I hope he stays depressed at wide receiver 19 because I will snag that up. I would gladly grab him a round earlier if I had to, just to make sure I got him.
I think he's my favorite value-based pick off of this team. The only reason I say don't copy and paste from last season with some of these guys is, A, Jalen Waddle was hurt and or playing hurt when he was out there. They didn't have a fully healthy backfield last season to be able to rely on. Now, presumably with 3 of these guys, they should be able to have 2 that are always healthy, at least. So I just don't, like, Mike McDaniel has never had a fully healthy backfield in his tenure with the Dolphins. That's why I just say, like, I don't think Tyreek's going to catch as many passes as he did last year. I also don't think it's going to make him bad for fantasy. Like, still take him and be thrilled. Just, I wouldn't expect, a 2,000-yard season from Tyreek. That's all I'm saying.
No, 2,000. No, come on, Jake. But I still think he will return that wide receiver 2 value pretty easily. I do. I just love it. All right.
So then the question,
do you want to finish up this talk with Tua?
Yes, please. What the fuck do we do with Tua Tagovailoa? We've just said all these great things about everybody else.
If I was punting quarterback and not going with one of the top 5, I would take Tua late. He's going late. He's got great weapons around him. Yeah, why not take him? At least for me, the concussion concerns are erased. I know it's always there, but it's there for anyone, let's be honest. But he proved he could play the whole season. He stayed healthy last year. So yeah, if I was punting the position and wanted to go a little bit later round quarterback, he would be a target for me because you got to love the offense that he's in, and there is definitely a ceiling there for him.
Don't know what to do with Tua, because here's my bones with Tua. He's had an amazing team around him and an amazing coach the last 2 years, but he's never finished close to being a high-end fantasy quarterback. I think last year he was like QB 18 in points per game. Season before, he was like QB 10-ish in points per game. I don't feel like he has a greater ceiling than that. I mean, he's been throwing a hell of a lot. Like I said, with a fully healthy backfield, maybe he doesn't even throw quite as much. To me, it's the conversation of him and Jared Goff are the same guy. And I don't know that I want either of them in my one quarterback league because he doesn't run. He doesn't have rushing upside.
That is the big thing.
That sucks. And it's like as good as both of those receivers and OBJ. We didn't even talk about OBJ really, or Jonnu being added into the mix. But I mean, as your wide receiver 3, yeah, we don't talk about Jonnu. But I will say, I don't know. I've been disappointed by Tua's ceiling, so I would pass. I think in one QB leagues, like you can get as of right now, Jaden Daniels is going around Tua's draft area. I'd so much rather have Daniels than Tua. Would you?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
It would be close, but yeah, I think I'd lean Daniels in there as well.
Rushing upside for the win. All right, let's move on.
Yep. Okay, let's finish up this division here with the Bills. So in the offseason, they lost Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Kyle Allen, Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield. Woo! And they brought on board Curtis Samuel, Mitchell Trubisky, Chase Claypool, and Mac Hollins. And in the draft, 2nd round wide receiver Keon Coleman and 4th round running back Ray Davis. So Jake, kind of a revamped wide receiver core. I guess I don't know what to think about this Bills offense. We know Josh Allen is Josh Allen. He's going to run. He's going to score touchdowns on the ground. Do you see him taking a little bit of a step back this year as far as the passing numbers go? Or do you think it's just kind of overblown because, as we've talked about with Stephon Diggs, last couple seasons, he's kind of drifted off as the season went on and wasn't nearly as relevant as early in the season. Gabe Davis is gone, but he was very much a volatile wide receiver on that squad. So what are your thoughts here? Jake? Well, it looks like Jake is frozen, or maybe I'm frozen and Jake is staring at my screen. I don't know, but I will keep talking here. So, Josh Allen, I think he ends up taking a little bit of a step back this season in the passing realm. But as far as his legs go, he is such a safe floor with those rushing touchdowns and the rushing yards that he gets. So I have no concerns there. But yeah, as far as his passing goes, I think it could be a little bit of a step back. I'm not as big a believer in Keon Coleman as everyone else seems to be. But Jake, let's hear your opinion here about Josh Allen.
I thank you for vamping there for an unbearable amount of time, as we're both apparently going to deal with internet issues tonight. Josh Allen, I've given a lot of thought to this over the last 2 seasons because we've seen Josh Allen be resurrected by an elite wide receiver joining him and Stephon Diggs. I think Stephon Diggs joining the Bills. By the way, which Bill is this team named after? Or it has to be multiple Bills, I guess, that this team has been named after. That's just a question that I want answered. We don't have to suss it out tonight on the podcast, but nobody's ever told me that. Anyways, Stephon Diggs joining, very important for Josh Allen when it happened. I don't think he needs him anymore. He doesn't need him anymore. The last 2 seasons, we've seen Stephon Diggs fade away in the second half of the year, and Josh Allen's numbers never flinched, never moved. He was still the guy, still elite without Stephon Diggs' heavy involvement. He's still got a lot of talent to work with. I know you mentioned Keon Coleman. I apologize if I'm overlapping names you mentioned earlier, but Khalil Shakir, I think, still deserves some credit for what he did towards the tail end of last year. I love me some Curtis Samuel. I'm a big Curtis Samuel believer. Dalton Kincaid should take a massive step up and sort of fill in some of those wide receiver gaps this year. I don't have any issues about Josh Allen. He should still be QB1 to QB3, just depending on your individual preference.
Yeah, I think I'm not as bullish as you are on Josh Allen this season. He's still going to be probably top 5 guy. I just don't know that he is the quarterback that lifts wide receivers. Unlike some other guys, like your Mahomes that can just throw it to anyone, or Rodgers in his prime, he had a bunch of no-name wide receivers, but still got it done. I don't know that Josh Allen is one of those guys. And I may be wrong. And I will gladly come on this podcast after the season's over and admit I'm wrong about Josh Allen, that he is one of those guys that can kind of lift up the talent around him to his level, as opposed to kind of going down to their level. So that's my biggest question mark with Josh Allen.
I mean, that's fair, but I would just like to redirect here, because I do think he's the most interesting guy. Like, when you're in drafts, if you are an early QB drafter, Josh Allen's going to be staring you in the face. He's going to go off the board somewhere between QB 1 to 3. I don't think he falls to that range that you'd be comfortable drafting him, Dustin. So people are going to have to ask, can the dude do it? And if we just look at weeks 10 to the end of last season, this is after the Stephon Diggs now annual fadeaway, where Khalil Shakir was basically his number one. Gabe Davis was still in the mix, right? Just some of these less interesting guys. He was still the quarterback 1 in points per game, above even Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott, because he runs much.
I was going to say, how much of that was due to the rushing rather than his passing?
But I think his rushing is safe. As a fantasy manager, I get the points either way. So I will just sit and absorb them no matter how he gets.
So, yeah. All right. I hear you. I understand what you're saying. I have my I mean, they're like reservations about Josh Allen. It's not like I'm like, this guy's going to fall off a cliff and, he's going to be outside the top 12. Like, he's going to be a top 5 QB, like, without question. It's just, there's questions. So
you're taking
a little bit of devil's advocate.
You're taking him over Matt Stafford is what you're saying. You're still comfortable with that realm of outcomes for him.
Begrudgingly comfortable with that. Yes.
Okay. So we don't know. So your question, which is a very valid question, though, is about who's he throwing to? How well are they going to produce? I asked it this way. I phrased it as, who's the number 1 pass catcher on the team? Because I don't want to limit it to just the wide receivers necessarily, because that eliminates the Dalton Kincaid of it all. And I have my own concerns, wee as they might be, to borrow a phrase from my co-host, about Dalton Kincaid. And like, why didn't you score a single touchdown last year when Dawson Knox was playing? Like, all of his production came when Dawson Knox was injured, which is weird. But all the hype was there. I think he could still live up to it. So if you just got to pick one of these guys, is it the rookie? Is it the crafty veteran, Curtis Samuel? Is it Dalton Kincaid? Who do you go with?
I will lean towards Kincaid, and I'm not a big Kincaid believer. I think he's fine. I think he's fine. I think the hype is a little too much. I wasn't a big fan of them drafting him last year, but maybe this was kind of in their plans all along, where they knew the end was coming near with Stephon Diggs, and they knew he wasn't going to be with the team after the season. So they were kind of planning for that. And instead of taking like an alpha wide receiver, more of a tight end that plays as a wide receiver, basically, where they could have Kincaid and Dawson Knox on the field at the same time this year. So I'm going to lean Kincaid only because Curtis Samuel, he'll have his boom weeks. As I said, Jake, before you got back on, Keon Coleman, I'm not a believer in him. And Khalil, he's fine, but it doesn't excite me. I think Kincaid is the one that could really step forward, and he has the draft capital behind him.
Yeah, I'm putting my Wii reservations aside, which Mr. Scamper says, by the way, Wii reservation sounds like an awesome Safari game. I agree with you 1,000% on that. But I'm putting those aside from last year for Dalton Kincaid just because of the opportunity and the fact that Josh Allen, he can't run it all the time. He is still going to throw a whole lot. Curtis Samuel, though, all I want to point out, much smarter people than me have diagnosed Curtis Samuel as not this gadgety receiver that everybody thinks he is. He can actually win against like man coverage downfield. He can be an outside receiver. He can be the crafty slot guy. He can be the behind the line of scrimmage guy. I don't like people pigeonholing my dude Curtis Samuel. That's all. And I will still try to draft him because he's going to go super late in drafts. And like, what if he is the number one on the team? What if?
Right.
You know,
he very well could be. Very well could be. And it wouldn't surprise me either, just with the way this team is constructed.
So then the rushing, I mean, outside of the quarterback, Josh Allen, who again is going to run his ass off once more this year. How comfortable are you with James Cook? I want to know, like, if you did draft receivers through the first at least 2 rounds, 3 rounds, like, do you like the idea of James Cook as your RB1 on your fantasy team?
No.
Yeah.
Not at all. I will let someone else step on that landmine. It is disgusting. I don't want any part of it. And I just know I will gladly pass him up and take a guy that's a little bit lower ADP instead of him. I just, no. I think he is probably this year's like biggest landmine in the draft.
Wow. I haven't heard you this fired up against a running back since we talked about Joe Mixon every other episode. That is the level of vitriol that I just experienced.
No, it's not. Well, that's a whole different level of vitriol here. I don't hate James Cook by any means. I just think his upside is capped by Josh Allen. And I wouldn't care if Saquon Barkley went to the Bills. He would still be capped by Josh Allen and his rushing ability. Like, they're going to give Josh Allen all the touch. I mean, I just don't like it at all. And I don't understand why he's being pumped up that far.
It is, look, to just one last reference to Joe Mixon. It is because he had like 2 or 3 games last year where it's like, holy shit, look at this guy. He absolutely went off. And people just see that and they ignore the rest of those games where he was duds. It's exactly like the Joe Mixon thing. Every year he does this to people. James Cook is just taking that crown. I agree with you. I don't understand why you mentioned Saquon. Like, everyone's worried about Jalen Hurts sniping the running back volume and Lamar Jackson sniping the running back volume. Nobody really talks about Josh Allen and his running backs the same way. And it's just fucking weird because he's going to rush for a bunch of touchdowns too. And so, yeah, I'm out on James Cook. He's not going to get dump offs. I kind of like the rookie Ray Davis. Not that that's even a big part of this, but throw it onto the heap, I guess. I don't want.
They had to bring someone else in as a backup. Like, they couldn't have just run with who they had. So I understand drafting him, but yeah, no, I'm just, like I said, I will let someone else step on that landmine for me, and I will just wave and take the next guy down.
I love it. Whew. That's a hell of a way to wrap that. Anything else you want to mention about the Bills? I don't have anything.
No, I think we covered it pretty well. I mean, we talked Kincaid. I mean, that's kind of the other big piece there, but we lumped him in with the wide receivers. So I'm feeling good about how we talked about the Bills.
Me too.
And
still don't know. Do you think it's named after like Buffalo Bill Hickok? You know, he was a He was a cowboy from back in the day. I remember hearing his name. I just want to know the etymology of this team name that is so underwhelming. Why isn't there a Connecticut Joe's? Why isn't there a Des Moines Greg's? You know what I mean? Nobody else is named after just a dude like this, and it concerns me. That's all.
Okay, here we go. Google told me the answer while you were talking here. The Buffalo Bills are named after Buffalo Bill Cody, a frontiersman and American soldier who hunted bison to feed construction crews on the Union Pacific Railroad.
Wow.
There
All
you go.
right. Okay. All right. I rescind most of my last statement, but I still do want to see a Des Moines Greg's come through if that's ever an expansion option. Just putting it out there. Just saying.
I don't even know what to say to that.
Okay. All right. I think we should just wrap this up.
All right. Well, yeah, we covered all the AFC East here, folks. We got one more division left to wrap this up, and it is. I should know this, but I don't. The AFC West.
There we go.
Yes. Yeah. AFC West. So we'll be covering them. Oh, the Wichita Willies. I like that, Scampers. So yeah, finishing off the divisional series next week. Great show this evening. Thank you, Jake. If you want to hear more fantasy, just greatness, follow my partner at Jake Trowbridge on Twitter. You can follow me at FF Dusty Dog. You can follow the podcast at Drinking Fantasy. Remember, drop your drunk trades to us, DM us. We will make them a part of the show, even if they're not super drunk trades. Just we like talking trades, especially as we're coming up here on the start of the season. Follow us, subscribe to us, do all that good stuff wherever you find your podcasts, YouTube, etc., etc. And we will leave it there for this week, folks. And until next week, keep drinking and talking fantasy football.
Cheers, FFers.